You've tuned into the BellingHOME podcast for the week of November 15, 2020, in episode 171.
It's a palindrome episode.
From that soon-to-be lockdown city by the Salish Sea, I am AJ Barsay.
And radar, madam, this is Chris Powell. On this episode, we are continuing our Quarantine Chronicles number. I forget. It's just been so many. All I want to do is zoom in the podcast. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a remote, socially distanced, still affectionate BellingHOME podcast.
Well, Chris, I guess we're back in studio, as it were. How you doing, buddy?
To take an Aerosmith song, we're back in the saddle again. How's it going, AJ?
Well, the weather outside is cold. We've got some headlines that we're going to cover in a little bit. But yeah, for everyone who's listening in, and we're back on Zoom for a multitude of reasons. We're recording this Sunday, the day that this will probably go out, Sunday, November 15th. And yeah, so Chris, we were off the mic for a little bit because life occurred, as I said on our station break.
That's my term, and you used it well in this case. There, I actually had an opportunity. You know, my podcast plate is overflowing as of recent. The big plate, the shiny titanium adamantium unbreakable plate that is a BellingHOME podcast. Vibranium, yes, Wakanda forever. The BellingHOME podcast is forever. I've also had my solo project of the Canvas Insider for all the ed tech nerds out there. But I had a recent opportunity to be a guest on a new upcoming Startup Those Young Kids in the single digit episodes for the time being, the Whatcom Dads podcast. The other Chris, the cooler Chris, the more handsome Chris, and Nathan and Mark, the three hosts for the Whatcom Dads podcast. Guess what, AJ? They've officially arrived on the goods list.
Welcome aboard.
That's right. They had me on as a guest, and from a step-parent perspective, it was a great conversation. And there's a little bit of dragging going on as well. So a whole lot of great content, and got a link to in the show notes. And for the love of Mr. Almighty Jim Cornette, drink. That's right. And I think they were in some aspects on the Whatcom Dads podcast, but. I had a great time, and like I said at the end, continued success, amigos. I'm glad to have another Whatcom podcast in the feeds on my podcast app.
Yeah, no, that was a good episode. Matter of fact, this isn't in the notes, but I did listen, and the one takeaway that I did get from that I think is applicable whether you're any kind of parent, mom, dad, stepdad, mixed family, however you would wish to identify, is that you made mention that you initially tried when you had your little shrimpy join the family or mixed the family together. You at first tried to like parent like you were parented because you're like, yeah, I turned out okay, and then immediately there was this little thing that snapped, and you're like, oh, this isn't working. And I thought that was a really good piece of advice.
Absolutely, and you have to go through it before you can have that little click in your mind. The first few years of a blended family coming together, it ain't the Brady Bunch, yo. Problems are not being solved in 20 minutes plus commercials with a cool housekeeper preparing all the meals. Hi, Alice. But what we had to do, all of us had to do some work to make the family stronger through the adhesive of life, all the stickiness of life. I love that analogy. And life gets sticky. And what, unfortunately, how you were parented, AJ, by pops and moms, your folks, doesn't necessarily apply to your little shaver. And the more that we can throw out that book of parenting and realize that your little one, who is cute as bleepity bleepity bleep explicit tag, your little one needs to be parented in a different book that you and your wifey are currently writing. Yeah. My wife and chapter, what is it, 4, 5, 6, 4. My wife and I had to completely reset the book of parenting and go according to what was applicable to our little one. So she's not as little right now, but if you check out the the show. I was lucky to be on episode 5 of the Walking Dads podcast, and it was a great time. They know what they're doing, and they're going to have a whole lot of great guests on the show. It's not just for dads, moms in the house or other parents in the house. Y'all can listen in if you wish, and maybe get a couple of tips and ideas to consider for future family needs. All right. Yep. That's why I was a little AFK, AFM, away from microphone, away from podcast, whatever acronym you want to use. But AJ, you alluded to this in a couple episodes. We allude to this obviously in many episodes that should you be on terrestrial radio, let me actually not mumble that. If you're on terrestrial radio, you might be listening to us on KMRE 102.3 FM.
They're community-powered and community streaming worldwide on KMRE.org.
That's right. And the internet is one of the places where you can listen to them. And us, Saturdays at 3 p.m. Oh, my goodness. It's still going on. They still like us. They really like us. But
yes.
Anyway, AJ, you did a whole lot of data resurrection, consolidation, reclamation, restoration, whatever else I got going on. Talk about it.
So the preface to this, and this dovetails back into mise en place when we did that episode. And if anything, the pandemic has kind of shown me, not just as a technologist, but just as a digital citizen, is that we have taken for granted what the internet, and specifically all the services the internet wishes to provide us, for a bivvy of prices and opportunity. And what I mean by that is we've gotten used to things like having free email. And, you and I have talked ad nauseum for 4 years about the cost of what free means on the internet. And I'm changing that narrative just ever so slightly. And it's something that I have to attribute to my wife, because she actually picked on this and coined this term. And I think it's really applicable now, even more so with COVID. And it's this concept of digital bartering. I think we need to kind of recognize when we get something for free, we're actually bartering digitally what that service is providing us. So for instance, in the case of Google, or any of them, I'm not picking on Google, Apple, whatever, whomever, they give you something for free. In return, you do get something out of it. You do get a service. You do get a, reduction on the cost of the device or whatever.
Usually a whole lot of convenience. A whole lot of convenience as a world-class Big 5 free product that you are signing up for.
Exactly. And that it's that cost that I think I kind of wanted to bring to the forefront of what we are actually getting, because people are getting fatigued. You and I have seen this in our day jobs, that people are getting fatigued and with regards to a lot of these services, and specifically having to up the cost. For instance, we'll pick on Zoom, which we are, full disclosure, recording on today. We did get the pro version for free for a while. And now as the pandemic goes on, now people have to, quote, pay for the pro service. What were you getting in that time frame? So that's kind of the notion that I want to bring in, because I'm going to hit on something that I think is near and dear to everybody's heart, and that is storage. I think we've all gotten used to we just pay the $9.99 a month for iTunes, or we pay for the however much it is for Prime. What's Prime membership? $130 a year now? Depending
on single, family, student, whatever have you. Let's just say $120. Make it $10 a month. It's a nice round number, kind of like a bagel. So let's try 120 a year, 10 a month.
Sure. And then on top of that, and this recently hit me ×2 now, Google has announced that if you are in the Google Photos sphere, P.S., and by the way, everyone, you might want to read your email, because starting in December, your unlimited free photo and video uploads has changed.
Merry Christmas.
You now have unlimited photo uploads and video uploads, reduced resolution. And if you are doing that full resolution, you will have 15 gigs of your combined Google-age that will be decremented. So, Chris, I decided to harness our inner unofficial tagline to the show, and that is, I'll go first. And I decided, let's bring everything home. And that's why I wanted to name this one BellingHOME Your Data. Bellingham, BellingHOME Your Data.
I like that title, by the way.
Yeah. And what would it cost? And bear in mind, I am negating the fact that yes, I am a professional technologist, so yes, a lot of geekery had to occur. But here's the thing that I recognize in this project: there is no Mr. Fusion. Quite frankly, if you are paying the monthly thing for whomever you use, Amazon S3, Backblaze, whomever, you're paying for not just storage, but world-class, quote-unquote, technical support to make it work. There is nothing on the market, Chris, right now that is the Mr. Fusion of getting your data home safely, securely, and speedily is the key part that I want to hit on today.
In the words of Dr. Emmett Brown, that's pretty heavy.
Yes.
To use the other Back to the Future reference.
I'm gonna harness my inner Michael J. Fox right now. Right now I'm in the beginning of the first video and you just see me cranking up the dial slowly. You see me putting on the shade. I got my guitar and we are going to slam the stack here. So what we're going to be talking about is network attached storage or DAS, direct attached storage, and versus hard drives. This is all something that we are used to. As this pandemic progresses on and on, more and more of us are going to use more and more storage. Where the heck are we going to put it? And more specifically, how much stuff do you already have up there that you forgot about? So I'm also going to be tackling this from, I think, probably the most pertinent side of our data storage, and that is photos. And I'm not talking as a pro photog here. Personal photos, like that is our memories, our digital memories you have secured in a bevy of places. Do you know where it's at? Do you know how much it is? Like that was eye-opening even for me, because full disclosures, as a pro photog, I manage over 4 terabytes of professional data. Okay.
For the rest of us that don't know what the heck pro photog does, that is 4,000 gigabytes plus of files of those cute moments, those high quality graphics. 4,000 gigabytes, y'all.
Yes, that is every portrait shoot, every bridal shoot, every event that I have shot professionally. That's what I've got that I store. And we've mentioned this on the show. Chris, you take the same approach where every year for years on end, we just go out, usually on Black Friday or, back to school, and we get a new drive. And then we get the mate to the new drive. And then we send those drives off so that we're doing our 3-2-1 backups.
Yep.
Until for me, this year, I got a bad mate. So I got 2 drives, 2 4-terabyte drives as usual. And my master drive was great. The brand new out of the box one was not. And that's what sent me over the edge. So a network attached storage solution is basically, instead of having these bevy of drives where you have these, like even off on camera right now, because I've got drives everywhere, you centralize it into a little computer that manages those drives for you. It's called a server. That's all a server is, folks, is a little computer that manages drives.
By the way, an Apple TV is a little bit of a computer. A Roku stick is a bit of a computer. An Amazon Fire TV stick is a bit of a computer. It runs an operating system. It does things for you. You just connect some hard drives to it, and it can do wonderful, magical things. Go ahead.
Yeah. So when we talk about a NAS or a DAS or a server, it's not a big, scary technical device because you already deal with it. Like Chris said, like you just take something that has an operating system and then you attach storage to it. That is a server or a NAS, network attached storage. So there's lots of brands and I have no affinity to any of them. Full disclosure, I've pretty much used all of the ones I'm going to be listing. And in no particular order. I think they all have their merits for different applications. But the big names that you'll hear is Synology, QNAP, Drobo, and WD MyCloud. And Chris, I think you and I, like I said, over the years, I don't think there's a single one of these that you and I have not worked on over the years.
No, I've worked on all 4 of them, and I will be happy to throw some of them under the bus and and to talk positively about some. But AJ, this is your baby. Cuddle it. Keep going.
So a lot of these, what you're looking at is when you look at a NAS, you're looking at 2 avenues. You want to store your stuff securely and also get access to it. And it's the access part that you're going to be paying a lot extra for, to be honest, because like we just said, like to buy hard drives and hook them up or have them on a computer that we call a NAS and put it on your network, that's really easy. That's the easy part. Where you have to be a geek is to secure the access so that you can remote get into it. And that is where Amazon, Google, Apple does a really good job, that convenience factor, because you're paying for somebody to do that for you.
And by doing that, by allowing others to take care of that for you, kind of like the mechanic taking care of your car, you're paying a price. For these big companies, they also have ways, if they're a rogue employee that has access to stuff, they could theoretically have access to your information and your data and your precious memories. AJ, you are taking the route where you are going to be the mechanic, the creator, the maintainer, the owner of the keys to the kingdom all yourself, which is a daunting task for a lot of folks out there.
So when you roll your own, as Chris and I usually say, I'm going to start from the bottom and kind of work my way to the top, because like WD MyCloud, okay, this is a very simple, it looks like a little book, to be honest. Okay, it's a little plastic book that is basically 1 or 2 hard drives that are in a computer unto itself, ran by the kind folks over at Western Digital. And really, even pros use this. Like, I know Philip Bloom, of renowned CNN and just documentarian extraordinaire. Sup, Philip? Big fan. So, like, even he endorsed this as a way to migrate all of your mega collection of drives into a single place, so that you can at least just see what the heck you've got. And then it has some cloud accessibility stuff that is pretty user-friendly. Like, it's not pretty, but it's user-friendly. I will say that. It's not pretty. It is user-friendly, though, where you can access your stuff on a mobile device. And that's probably the cheaper route to go by. And so the starting gateway drug to getting this process of BellingHOMing your data is you have to get it all to you. Because the thing that I recognized, Chris, is that I had Google, I had Amazon, I had Apple, I had even Box.net back in the day, and Dropbox. Uh-huh. So I was consolidating all of that, okay, to the tune of myself and my wife, and also her Google and whatever. So you have a multitude of accounts. And so I consolidated all of that, Chris, and I recognized that after all of that, do you want to take a guess at how much data of photos? Because again, I'm only hitting the photo side, personal photo side, that my wife and I forgot. Like, we took all these pictures. Oh, they were super important to us at the moment. That sandwich back in London that we hadn't looked at because we don't care anymore. Do you know how much data that we had?
125 exabytes.
Oh, that's nice. No, we had close to 400 gigs.
That's a lot.
400 gigs. And that is across multiple iPhones, some Google phones, all those photos. And there's duplicates, triplet, quad, octuplets of these photos, because after a while, you're just, as we change services or we change devices, they get re-uploaded into new things. And culling that, you have to get all of those sources, bring them down, and get it on something like a MyCloud or a big burly hard drive, so that you can start culling it, so that you can get it back down to a manageable size. Even when I did with all of my tech foo, Chris, and a $9 app off of the Apple App Store called Photo Sweeper, which I would recommend if you're on the Mac side of things. It basically went through all of that 400 gigs and culled it down for me, showing me all the duplicates, matching the sizes, the pixels, the ratio, because you don't want to delete like a good quality photo and then just keep the lower resolution stuff. Google, I'm looking at you. And then on top of that, the naming conventions, Chris, like some of these services put them in folders by date. Amazon doesn't. I'm just going to stop there before I rage. Mm-hmm. And so trying to organize this was a huge hassle. But the biggest thing that I had to start with was getting it home, getting it on a server or getting it on a hard drive itself so I can cull it down, that first culling. Sure. And once you do that, you may realize, okay, well, holy moly, AJ, like 400 gigabytes is a lot. That's a lot more than I have on my iPhone. You're right. That's why we need to get it in front of you. Because if you don't see these memories that you thought were so important, why are you keeping them? You need to recondo this stuff, okay? If that photo of that pint that you had in London doesn't bring you joy, then why are you keeping it all these years? When I am dead and gone, do I want my son to deal with that 400 gigs of stuff that he's not going to care about? It's that
he'll he'll probably have a hologram that he can kind of look and with his hands swipe in thin air to be able to move things and touch a photo when that technology takes a quantum leap. But here's a question though I have for you, AJ.
Hit me.
So I'm speaking for a lot of my friends, a lot of my colleagues, some dear folks out there that are just kind of like, where would I begin? I know that I have a ton of photos on Facebook. I know that I printed out a whole lot of photos on Costco's website or Walgreens's website. I don't know how much photos I've had, but I've had about 5 years of using a smartphone, that have taken all these photos. Where should I start? Like, what's something that is a non-techie way to get started?
Honestly, even before looking at these other NASs that we're going to talk about, tell yourself, instead of upgrading to the next whatever device you're on this year, spend that money towards a big hard drive. Okay, that's where I would start, because you're going to have that hard drive running for a while, and hopefully you have, and also take a part of that money and bump your internet speed so that you can download all this stuff. Because remember, I just said, folks, I had 400 gigs of stuff. Even the big bad Google has to break that up into 50 gigabyte zip files for me to download, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
So to get it back home, it's going to take some time and a little bit of resources. And like I said, instead of going from I'm going to pick on iPhone, folks, from the iPhone 11 to the iPhone 12, instead of spending that $1,000 on that, spend a couple $100 on a hard drive that's going to home all of your data, and then also the internet speed so you can get it.
That kind of helps matters out. Yeah, I agree.
So once you get it and you do that culling, then you can look at doing a NAS. So like I said, the MyCloud's kind of the bottom of the barrel. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just the more affordable option and easy to use option. Then you may have to expand storage. And that's where you look at things like Drobo. You and I are going to bite our tongues quite a bit on this because we've had some bad experiences with that brand over the years.
Yeah, I had a bad experience with a Drobo, and that's all I'm going to say about it. But it is a company that makes network-attached storage devices.
Yes, and to their benefit, it can run very fast.
Yes, it can.
So the reason why we're biting our tongue. So when you look at network-attached storage, you're going to be moving away from BOD, and I don't mean bring your own device. Bunch of drives, because when you have drives together, there's a lot of different formats you can put them in. One of the common ones is called RAID, and no, that is not a D&D term.
Or a bug killer product.
Yeah. So what RAID allows you to do is use the drives kind of more like a record. So instead of having drives 1, 2, 3, and 4, and all of them are 2, 2, 2, and 2, it sees it as a big group of 8, but just like a record, it writes simultaneously to all 4 of those bays. And when it does that, you get some extra protection of redundancy. So should a scratch in your record happen or a drive fail, you can take that drive out, put a new one in, and it knows the grooves to the left and to the right of that scratch, and it will heal itself.
That's a great way of putting it.
So that's the benefit of having RAID, and you can have the more space that you have, the more drives that you have, the more RAID numbering you can have. I'll just leave it at that, where you can have 1 drive fail, 2 drives fail, and that takes more drives and more space. That's all I'm going to go on that part. Drobo has their own version of that. Moving on. So yes. The other ones are QNAP and Synology, and I've set up several of these, and where these come into play is that you get the expanded storage and then expanded web services, because the other two, they're really for getting your stuff home so that you can see it, be present with it, and start culling what is really ding dong important to you and what's not. Beyond that, you need to, once you have those big box of storage and you sort the stuff, getting access to it again, because that's what you're paying for. Like, I can grab my iPhone, I can go into my iCloud, and boom, I can start doing documents, I can do videos and whatnot. And QNAP and Synology are really the main players for doing that type of stuff, because you can turn these into your email server, a VPN, your video streamer, and you can do it all on your local home so that nobody sees your stuff except when you're on your Wi-Fi. Or if you are a geek and you are safe and secure in how you do your stuff, making it so that your home NAS is a web server, and you can access your NAS anywhere in the world, just like the bigs.
It's a great way to be able to own your data, and more, we've been talking about this for quite a while. Weird things are afoot. The temperature is increasing in the online free platform pot, if you will, and we're not the Lorax just yet. We're not saying eject from, like Goose from Top Gun, but we want to raise caution that stuff is occurring in the internets, in the world, and how the companies are starting to how they are taking care of your data. It's not just like one of those wonderful neighborhood book exchange little things where people bring a book or take a book or something like that. There's a lot more to it. And I think we are wanting to, like some of you may opt to lease a vehicle. You don't necessarily own that vehicle. It's not yours. You will be returning it someday. Owning a vehicle has its merits. Leasing a vehicle has its merits. From a technology standpoint, we just got to, raise some awareness as we approach 2021 that your photos, you may want to have the Barça Games quarter quell and to go through and eliminate some unnecessary photos and files as tributes to your previous online activity.
Well, and the other thing is like when you do that, you get more. From a photographer standpoint, you get more connected to what is actually a meaningful image. We have gotten so used to just running and gunning with these things. And on top of that, I'm also going to throw Apple under the bus. Those live photos that you all take, that is a photo and a little QuickTime video that gets taken every time you do that. So you now have to manage yourself, if you go this route, of managing those little videos and those photos. And I'm not going to just throw Apple under the bus. Some of you may remember BlackBerry, Palm or BlackBerry, I can't remember who, originally released the Zoe. That is actually what this technology is really based off of, where you have these living moments where it was just like, an animation plus the photo, so you can get the, motion effect. So this isn't a new concept. But again, think about what media you are making. And that takes space. It has to take space somewhere. So let me break down the cost for everybody. So I went down this road, and and by the way, if you're listening to this and the one thing that you checked out on me, you're like, oh man, AJ said security. I don't want to deal with that. Look, you can buy a NAS, and this is how I operate. You take that NAS, you plug it into your network, you move all of your stuff to it, and when you need it, you plug in that Ethernet cable, or if you're on an Apple, that dongle and Ethernet cable to it. Yeah. And that's the only network you touch. You're actually turning your NAS into a DAS, a direct attached storage solution. And that way, you don't have to worry about the apps or the web server or anything like that. It doesn't touch the internet unless you physically plug it into the back of your router for like system updates and stuff. And that takes the scariness out of this, really, because basically it turns the power and the benefit of putting it on a NAS, where you can get searchability, because the NAS is its own operating system. So you can get indexing and searching, and you get that Google-ish thing where it's like, Chris Bellingham podcast 2016, which I did, Chris. And I find that picture of us drinking coffee back in the day on the Letter Streets. Shout out to Letter Streets Cafe.
Hi, Letter Streets.
So like, it's things like that where you get that benefit where if you have a diaspora of storage solutions on drives up in the cloud, you don't know where anything is. So getting it home so you can search it, cull it, do that stuff. And then if you're worried about security, don't plug it into your router unless you need it to update, or for when you need it to be remote. So like, let's say you're out and about. We're all home these days, for most of us. Major props to all of our people that are essential, keeping our society going. But you can plug it in when you choose to, as opposed to when you lease it to all of the bigs. It's up there and it's connected 100% of the time. Yep. You get that choice. So for me, I spec'd out a quad core, 4 gigs of RAM, big burly NAS with 12 terabytes of storage that is rated to 10 because I want that redundancy. So if in case a drive fails. That is an estimate, folks, of over $1,000 I dropped. That is one iPhone that I dropped so that I could BellingHOME my data.
To give people an idea of the type of burliness of this spec that you did, is this a Honda Insight, a Nissan Leaf, a Toyota Prius, or a Tesla X-Type?
Um, I would say it's more like a Tesla 3 Model 3 series. It's more
Okay.
accessible, but I got a couple of trim packages on it.
All right. So this is the upper scale, if you will.
You've heard of like the slow food movement. This is the slow data movement, where you have to wait a slight. You have to have a little patience to get to your stuff, but you have all your stuff is the difference.
Hmm.
And for me as a geek, it took me over 2 weeks. 2 weeks, Chris, to locate everything, cull everything, populate everything, secure everything, and then scrap it all over, do it again because I'm a geek and I want to make sure I did it right the first time. So it took me a better part of, we're solidly a month to get everything up and running and migrated, so that I can cull my stuff. And now it's just pretty much ubiquitous. My wife is just, overjoyed. It's like, oh, where's that one video of our child, but again, I want to remind everybody, even as a geek, without paying the time and energy and knowledge that this brain has, it takes $1,000 just to get going to store my professional side and my personal side and secure it and get access to it. And then on top of that, that doesn't count again the backing up so that it's remote, because now I have everything in one pot. What if the house burns down, Chris? It still doesn't get you away from having to have an external source for your data, but getting it in front of you so that you have control over it. And that way, if policies change, whether it's Google or Amazon or whoever, it doesn't impact you because you have control over it. You're owning it as opposed to leasing it. I like that analogy.
Absolutely.
So that's my BellingHOME for BellingHOME your data. So we're going to segue to what would have been Bellingham Bingo. However, if we were a news show, we'd probably do it better.
Absolutely.
At the time of this recording, Governor of Washington State, Jay Inslee, has had a press conference with regards to the COVID-19 cases here in the United States, specifically here in Washington State. And Chris and I are not going to have a Bellingham Bingo because I'm not going to report the news, but I will report a headline from the Seattle Times. Quote, Governor Inslee orders sweeping restrictions on indoor gatherings, restaurants, bars, gyms, as COVID-19 cases surge in Washington State. So I think we're going to go with the letter I and just be informed, because
Yep.
I don't think you and I want to give a recommendation if you're not going to be able to get access to it. Stay tuned for what's going on. Is what I would
Or
say.
choose a letter N in the big O card for news, or choose G for governor, or O for over oh my gosh. Yeah, that's a good one as well. So anyway, let's talk about some quality assurance, shall we?
Yes. So the last bit, of course, is our favorite bit, is these picks have been picked for you, dear listener, by AJ Barce and Chris Powell for your quality assurance. Chris, what do you got?
I subscribe to a number of videos on the YouTube and some vloggers and such, and I had to chuckle at the latest one from the minimalism documentary director and a minimalist YouTube vlogger. His name's Matt Diavella, and Matt's a wonderful guy. Love to have him on the show. If you're listening, Matt. I know we'd have a great conversation talking about minimalism, but here's the latest one. Got a link to this video in which Matt Diavella, fully entrenched in all of the latest and greatest Mac-related software upon the release of all these new products, iOS, iPhone 12, iOS 14, all the new products, the new M1 chips on the MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, and Mac Mini. He's decided to downgrade his iPhone for a flip phone.
An Alcatel flip phone, I noticed, by the way.
Yes, an Alcatel flip phone. And boy, we love those Alcatel flip phones. So basically, I don't know how many episodes ago we talked about this, but hey, guess what, Matt? I went first. I wanted to see when the Nokia remodels of 2019 came out. I got a little candy bar. Yeah, with the colors, the candy bar type phone. And I wanted to see if I could eliminate my smartphone. And I do recall, upon setting things up, putting my SIM card in there, I could make a phone call. That's great. Text messaging, game over. Because if those of you who can harken back to the days of the flip phones, text messaging somebody where you had to hit the number three times,
Five.
Yes, to get the F letter. Not having maps, not GPS, not having my music nor my podcast, just make phone calls and somehow deal with text messages. I lasted 24 hours. And I put things back. I'm like, this is not sustainable for where I'm currently at. So good luck, Matt. Smoochy moochies. I hope it goes well. Love to see you in 30 days. You got one for a podcast that you recently listened to.
Yeah, dude. So this one, oh man, it has been a long time that I stumble upon a new podcast, and I have been binge listening like none other.
Interesting.
This is a show called The True Spies Podcast. And a couple episodes back, I mentioned I love spy versus spy stuff. I love James Bond. I love The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Like I love espionage. I love the notion of not like, wooing women and drinking martinis and shooting the bad guy. But I like this notion of what spy and espionage is and the counterintelligence side. And I just love that notion of psychology and policy and government and disembowelment all in one package that is still going on today. Like it's not just a plot point. This is a real life thing. And so True Spies is hosted by these two wonderful women out of the UK, and they go into the in-depth stories of real life spies and real life spy moments, and beginning in those first person accounts from these retired espionage agents. And so we're listening, we can get stories from like the Cold War. I listened to this episode where this Cold War agent from our side had to go on the other side of the Iron Curtain and then get himself into this manhole to physically tap wires, because at the time the Russians were making like missiles, and that was they were making the first communications hub between the city and the research facility, and the US was going in there so that we could get like what was going on with those nuclear stuff. Like the level of what has to happen, it sounds like something out of a James Bond film. But this already happened. Like this has happened. And they also go into other avenues of counterintelligence, where they had the gentleman who was the real Black Klansman, what that film was based off of. Just a whole bunch of different stories. And listening to it, you're just going, how would I react in those situations? And that's what's cool about this podcast, is that they do take moments of like, okay, and I'm going to do my best British accent. Sorry, ladies. But now, imagine that you're in this manhole and you have only 35 seconds to tap these wires. What would you do as you hear footsteps above you? Do you think you can pull this off? What are you going to do? And then, like, I
would check my Instagram feed personally.
There was no Instagram during the Cold War. But no, it's just, they put in natural breaks where as you're listening and you get enthralled in it, you're like, well, I could do that. And then they throw in a monkey wrench of like, no, this really did happen. What would you have done? And it's that cool notion where you kind of have a little bit of participation in the show, which is kind of cool. So anyway, True Spies. I can't recommend it enough. It's some really good listening.
Very good. Now, so here's a pop quiz, AJ. If I'm thinking like I'm down in a manhole, like when you asked this for critical thinking, I'd be looking around for a fork to try and cross those wires, to try to make them all connected and things like that. And speaking of forks,
wah, wah, wah. That wraps it up for this 171st edition of the BellingHOME Podcast. Thank you again so much for listening to us, rating us, reviewing us, wherever and what manhole you might be listening to us from. Remember, if you are in a manhole here in the Bellingham area, you might be tuning into us over the terrestrial radio or tapping some sort of nuclear pipeline on KMRE 102.3 FM.
They're community powered. Wait, that was my manhole voice. They're community powered and streaming all over the internet at kmre.org. Let's wrap this one up, AJ. Hit it.
Honestly, from hopefully the not too locked down city by the Salish Sea, I'm AJ Barsay.
And I'm Chris Powell. Thanks once again for joining us on the hilarity, chaos, and madness that is the BellingHOME Podcast. Dude, I got to work on my lead in with the whole stick a fork in the show thing. I'll work on that for future episodes.
Cool.